Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 172 of Who's the Bossk, and we will be discussing the finale of Star Wars Ahsoka, the live action series that just ended on Disney Plus. We don't know if it's the season finale or the series finale. I guess they are calling it a season finale on Disney Plus, but we'll talk about what that might mean in a little bit.
Fingers crossed that it means more.
Exactly. And that's a great segue to introduce my guest for this week. For the discussion of Ahsoka, I've invited back on the show Lacey Gilleran from the Resistance broadcast. Lacey, thank you so much for coming back on Who's the Bossk to talk some more Star Wars with me.
Of course, I'm honored to be here. Love this pod. Also love Ahsoka. We'll get into obviously details and stuff, but I have never been the biggest Ahsoka fan, so I went in this with I wouldn't say low expectations, but no expectations.
Oh, okay.
So I've loved every second of it. So I'm really
great
to talk about it. So I was so honored you asked me because I can't stop talking about it.
Awesome. No, I'm super excited from you about that. But first, I want to ask you, how are you? How have you been doing? I ran into you very briefly at Star Wars Celebration in London with the Damons from Star Wars Explained. I saw you go up on stage to answer some trivia questions at one point.
I quickly got booed off stage. It was. I stand by my answer that Kylo Ren counts as a Sith, but most people booed me off. But yeah, no, it was fun. It was great to see you. It's always great to see everyone at Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah.
It's so sad that we're not getting another one until 2025, but at the same time now, because of just how things have worked out, it's going to be great because now seemingly all this content's being pushed to that year, so it's going to be even more nuts.
Right.
Yeah, I've been great. How have you been?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I think, whenever we have one of these live action Star Wars shows, it's a lot of work. I mean, you know all about this. It's just like constant discussion and writing about it and stuff. So I'm not complaining. I love it all, but it does keep me very, very busy. But
You've done a great job.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You have the Resistance broadcast. I've had a couple of you guys on the show. Tell me a little bit about what's been going on your podcast recently and what people can expect if they tune into some recent episodes.
Yeah, so I've been a part of the Resistance broadcast since 2018, so a little over 5 years now, 5.5 years. So it's me, John Hoey, and James Bainey, and we talk. We have 2 episodes a week. We talk about everything from deep dive discussions to the latest news or not news sometimes. But during the live shows or the live action shows, we do live shows every week, which has been super fun. So it's sad and bittersweet that Ahsoka's ending because it's one of those things that as a community, we all come together and freak out. And I don't know how you felt. I've loved the Tuesday nights.
Right. Oh, me too.
Oh my gosh. I'm on the East Coast, so it's been such a relief to be I get to watch this at a normal time and react with everybody, and I'm not getting up at 3 a.m. So that's been really enjoyable. But yeah, if people tune into the Resistance broadcast, they can just 3 people loving Star Wars, talking about Star Wars at all times, all different types of periods and things about Star Wars.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the new time slot. It was tough for me too, staying because I would stay up till midnight, watch the episode, then I'd write my review. So I'd be going to bed at 3 or 4.
Yeah. You were on the different side of the miserableness.
Right. So I think it's a brilliant move. I'm surprised they didn't do it earlier, actually. So very happy about that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, since you guys kind of spearheaded the whole Make Solo 2 happen campaign, I want to ask you your reaction to this recent news that has come out about the Lando series, that it was supposed to be a Disney Plus series, and now we heard from Donald Glover's brother or something, an interview with him, that it might now be a Stephen Glover. Okay, that it might now be a movie. What are you guys thinking? Would this count as a Solo 2, or would this be a Solo 1.5? And do you think there's a chance Alden might show up as Han in it, or what are your thoughts on this?
I appreciate you asking this. I really do, because so many people tag me immediately because Lando's tied to Han Solo, so they're like, "Oh my gosh, what does this mean?" First of all, I'm always hyped for more Star Wars. Anytime we get more Star Wars movies, TVs, books, whatever, I'm hyped because that means we're getting more content. That's great. And I know people hate when you call it content, but sorry, it's content. I'm really excited for it. I thought Donald Glover was one of the best parts of Solo. He just killed that role and was utterly perfect in perfection. I am a little sad that it's his story and not Han's, because the idea of Make Solo 2 happen is that we loved the movie so much that we thought it should be a series, and all the
Hmm.
actors signed on for 3 or more movies and talked about the continuation of the story, and then due to box office stuff, it didn't do so well, and there's a lot of variables that go into that, where we're not gonna get into that right now, but that being said, I think that the Lando story could lead to more Han, and I think it has to have Han in it at some point. So, fingers crossed that he is, but just as it being a Lando story, I'm so hyped. I love Donald
Yeah.
Glover. I love him as an actor. I love Childish Gambino, his rap music, so I'm on board.
Yeah. Did
I
you?
feel bad for the writer though that got kicked off of it
Oh,
because now
right.
it's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
on. So I feel a little bad about that, but at the same time, I get that if Donald Glover is being more personal with his time, which he said openly, like, "Hey, COVID taught me to value my time more," then
Yeah.
he just wants to be more invested.
I do feel bad for that writer as well, but I think it's the guy who made the Haunted Mansion
It
movie, and
is.
he seemed very nice when I saw him at D23 Expo. He did like a little presentation, but
Mhm.
I didn't care for the movie that much. So I was a little
That's what I've
worried
heard,
when I
so
came out of it, but
yeah.
I love Atlanta, the show that the Glover brothers are involved with, and
Yes.
for this to be their like follow-up project would be awesome. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. I hope the rumors and reports turn out to be true. I do
Mhm.
want to remind everybody out there, if you're watching this live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel, we would be happy to address any comments or concerns you may have in the chat there, such as Geo, our old pal Geo saying howdy, and
Hi,
then
Gia.
Frank Grande
Oh, I love Frank. Hi,
saying
Frank.
Lacey exclamation point and a little wave emoji. He's got a photo with R2D2 there in his avatar.
Good
Hi
people.
guys. Any questions or concerns you may have, put them in the chat. We got to do something called the 5 Star Wars questions. Lacey, this is your second time on Who's the Boss. That means you've graduated to level 2 of the 5
Oh,
Star Wars
I was gonna say,
questions.
I don't remember what I said the first time, so this might go weird, but now that it's a new
uh,
set of questions.
yeah, new set of questions. You ready for this?
Mhm.
Okay. Number 1 of the 5 Star Wars questions. Level 2. What is your favorite line of dialogue in a Star Wars movie or TV show?
I'm laughing because I feel like this is such a good question, and people ask me this all the time, and it's come up over the years of, like,
Yeah,
not just being on a podcast, but, like, as a Star Wars fan, people always ask this,
right.
and I'm so bad because I'm always like, "I don't know." Um, Recently, tying this back to Ahsoka a little bit, I did kind of really enjoy the line from Yoda in Last Jedi where he says, he's talking about apprentices and masters and
Yeah.
Padawans, and he says, "We are what they grow beyond." And I
Mm,
really loved that, and it kind of clicked with the whole Ahsoka Anakin thing, like him being so proud to see her move on and become a, better person and accept closure and not be so angry, I think.
yeah.
So I really like that quote, and I'm gonna go with it for now. It probably
Okay.
changes all the time.
That's a great choice. I remember the first time I saw that scene in the theater. I was so distracted, first of all, by Yoda being there. As soon as
Yes.
Yoda pops up, you're like, "Oh my god, it's Yoda!"
The
And
ears, just
then,
like with Grogu when he
yeah,
appears in Mandalorian, the ears, you immediately just start freaking out. Yeah.
exactly. And then I think my brain was kind of watching the puppet, to see
Mhm.
like, oh, there's just like little subtle differences in the puppet from what we were used to, and you're watching Frank Oz's performance and stuff. So I didn't really absorb all the dialogue until the second or third time I saw
No, I
The
agree
Last
with you. It's
Jedi.
just
Yeah,
so you're so taken back that you're like, "This is, like, not the weird puppet from,
right.
like, the
Yeah,
prequels. This is the puppet that they actually got the mold from the original." So,
right.
yeah, it looked great.
But yeah, some really smart writing there from Ryan Johnson, of
Mhm.
course. Number 2, which Star Wars planet would you like to live on and why?
Naboo, it's the prettiest. It's not sand or snow or some
Right.
desolate place that you're like, "Why am I here?" But I would live there before any wars broke out, like, when it was
Right.
enjoyable.
Yeah, this has been a popular choice to the answer to this question because it's basically like the
It's so pretty.
Italian
Yeah,
countryside planet.
yeah.
Yeah, so can't go wrong on Naboo. Number 3, what is your personal favorite era in the Star Wars storytelling timeline? And the examples I always list off here are the Old Republic, which is thousands of years before the original trilogy. You've got the High Republic now, which is a few hundred years before the original
Mhm,
trilogy.
mhm.
There's the prequels. There's the reign of the Empire between episodes 3 and 4. There's the original trilogy era. You've got the New Republic, which is where we are now in the Mando verse. Then you've got the sequels era, and then I also include the Legends timeline if you want to choose that, the old expanded universe, all that stuff after Return of the Jedi and peppered throughout. So,
Mhm.
Lacey, which of those do you consider your favorite and why?
I would say I'm probably in the Age of the Rebellion original trilogy, New Republic era,
Okay.
because that's where we are really getting a lot of the content right now and
Yeah.
shows and books and movies and stuff. Plus, I grew up on the original trilogy, so I'm always gonna have a soft spot for them. Now, that doesn't say that I'm not a huge sequel trilogy fan, because I am. I think, Rey and BB-8 and all those characters that came up in the sequel trilogy, like, changed my life.
Mhm.
Because I joined the podcast and stuff during that period, so I have, like, this kind of emotional attachment to it. But
Yeah.
if we're going on, like, based on storytelling and what I love the most, it's probably original trilogy.
Okay. I definitely am with you on that one. So number 4 is, which Star Wars creature would you like to have as a pet?
Oh my god, this is the hardest question of all these questions. I know I've been saying this for every single question, but this is the hardest one because there's so many good answers.
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna say a Lothcat after I've seen what they look like in Ahsoka.
Right.
There's nothing better. Now, to be clear, if we were gonna have, like, sidekicks, I'd pick an Anzellan like Babu Frick, no question.
Right. Well, and Zelen I would count as more of like a sentient
Sentient being.
species.
So I'm
Yeah.
saying pet, then
Yeah.
Lothcat. Absolutely
Okay.
Lothcat.
Did you happen to go to San Diego Comic-Con this year?
I didn't.
Okay, because they had the display, the Ahsoka display had the animatronic Lothcat
Yeah,
in one of
which
those
name is
little.
Murley. We just learned its name is
Oh,
Murley this week.
I didn't know. Where did we
Yeah,
learn that from?
they announced it on social media. Its name is
Okay.
Murley, Murley.
Now that's in universe name, or that's like the name
Yes.
of the puppet?
That's the
Okay.
name of, Sabine's Lothcat.
Okay. I was thinking because you know how they named the Jaws, the Jaws shark was named Bruce
Oh,
on set. I was thinking maybe
yeah.
the ILM guys had a
No,
nickname for
they
the puppet.
just announced this a couple days ago.
Okay, cool. So we have a name for the Lothcat. That's very
Murley.
neat. All right, the last of the 5 Star Wars questions, level 2. This is one of my favorites. Let's say you're Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm, and you can bring in any creative person to have a meeting about creating their own Star Wars story. So, which filmmaker or author would you bring in, or anybody else, would you bring in to have a meeting about creating their own story in the Star Wars universe?
So this question's a little funny to me because we've done stuff like this on TRB where we, over the years, have picked people that we want to do Star Wars projects. And I don't know if this is saying anything about me, guys. My first choice was Patty Jenkins,
Oh yeah,
and
that
my
didn't
second
work out.
and my second choice was Taika.
Yeah.
So I'm like 2 for 2 right now for unsuccessful people. But I'm gonna probably fall back on the person that I have said over the years, which is Chris McQuarrie, who does, like, the
Oh
Tom
yeah,
Cruise Mission
Mission
Impossible stuff.
Impossible.
Years ago, I tweeted at him and I was like, "Hey man, would you ever do a Star Wars?" And he wrote back was like, "No, I would not touch that." But since then, he
Yeah.
went back and deleted his tweet.
Oh.
So, like, all the replies are still there and my response is still there, but his tweet is not. So I'm like, what does this
Ooh,
mean?
somebody
So
did
I will
have a
take him.
meeting with Kathleen Kennedy.
He's so good, he just gets, like, the whole action adventure thing, and I love every Mission Impossible that's come out and everything else, like Top Gun and everything that he's worked on, so I'm gonna say Chris McQuarrie.
I really like that series too, the Mission Impossible movies. I rewatched all of them before the new one came out, whenever that was,
Nice.
6 months ago or so.
Uh-huh.
And my wife is like rolling her eyes at me because she thinks
They're
they're all the
so
same. And she
fun.
loves the Fast and Furious movies, which I roll my eyes at. But
Wait,
um,
she rolled her eyes at Mission Impossible, but she was like, "But I'm
yeah,
sticking with
she,
Fast. I'm
she
sticking with
loves
Fast 9."
yeah. But that new Mission Impossible I thought was great. The whole AI thing, and then the action scene at the end in the train where they're like running up the train that's
Which was
fall.
a real train. Yeah.
That was
Insane.
so cool. Boy, yeah, I would really enjoy to see Chris McQuarrie working on Star Wars. That would be pretty sweet. Okay, that is the end of the 5 Star Wars questions. That brings us to Star Wars headlines for the week. The big thing that I did recently was I read and reviewed this new novel, which you might be
Oh,
interested
I've
in.
been dying to read that.
Yeah, so this is coming out next week. It's called Star Wars Crimson Climb. It's written by E.K. Johnston, who wrote the recent Padme
Mhm.
trilogy. I really like this book. So the Padme stuff I wasn't terribly interested in. I thought it was well written, but I just don't really care that much about the handmaidens and stuff. So
Yeah, it's a
uh,
very specific character, like, you have to be into
yeah,
her and, like, what she's about, and I think
exactly.
a lot of people grew up on the prequels, so they're all about Padme. I love Padme too, but I wouldn't say I'm, like, a diehard Padme fan.
Okay. This was a different story for me because, like you, I'm a big fan of the Solo
Oh,
movie. I think it's
Kira's so
terribly
good.
underrated, and this is a character that there's huge gaps in her story that this is filling in one of. It takes place after Han has left Corellia, and then instead of following Han, we follow Kira and where she
Oh,
goes. So
so it goes from, like, the point that she gets basically given to Dryden Voss.
yeah, that happens about 100 pages in. So we spend some time
Wow.
with the white worms before that
Yeah.
in this novel. So I really enjoyed it. I got a huge kick out of it. I wrote a review. You can read it on laughingplace.com. I'm going to recommend this one. Go out and pick it up, especially if you're a Solo fan. It's a really fun novel. It's got some intriguing stuff in it. I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah, thumbs up from me on that. Is this
Awesome.
something that you will read, Lacey? I'm sure it is, right?
I would love to read it. I have gotten into the audiobook side of things only
Okay.
because it allows me to, like, do work while listening. And I think that especially the Star Wars audiobooks are so highly produced that I have to look into. I forgot this was coming out. I gotta
Yeah.
see if there's an audiobook version because I love Kira.
Yeah, you're gonna dig it, I think.
Nice.
So this week we had 3 new comic books come out: Star Wars: The High Republic, Shadows of Starlight #1. This was my favorite of the 3. So this is the kickoff to Phase 3 of The High Republic, which is, like I mentioned before, it's a couple hundred years before the original trilogy. Really, really wonderful issue by Charles Soule, kind of again, kind of filling in a gap. This is kind of telling us what's happening during that whole first year after the end. I don't want to spoil stuff, so I'm like avoiding specific plot details.
The end
But
of phase 2.
the end of it takes place after the end of phase one, because phase
Oh.
two was like a rewind
Mm.
to stuff that happened earlier. It's all very complicated. Are you a High Republic person at all
I
yet?
feel guilty, guys. I'm so sorry. I have not gotten into it. It's just there's so much.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So you have to follow along closely to make sure you get
Yeah,
everything. And I think it's one of those things that I probably will go back eventually and get started. I just got overwhelmed.
yeah,
My anxiety
sure.
was like, there's like 17,000 books to read. So as you were just talking about with Ahsoka, there's so much to cover a lot of
Yeah,
times that it's like
no,
I
yeah.
can't do everything. I don't know how you're reading all these books and stuff, man. Like,
I
good on
mean,
you.
it's a big part of my job is to consume all the Star Wars stuff, and even I
Yeah.
feel like I don't have enough time sometimes.
Yeah.
So
But I
I
I love that people are so into it, like, at Celebration,
yeah,
they had, like, a room full of, like,
yeah.
so many people packed, and I love that people are getting introduced to Star Wars through that, like, that's their thing. I'm interested to see how the Acolyte plays into it, because I think that
Mm,
might drive me to read some of the stuff
yeah,
because we obviously know some of those characters show up in
yes.
Acolyte, but unfortunately, no, I haven't, and I feel really guilty about it because I know those people are so awesome and they do such a great job, but it's a lot. It's
I
a
mean,
lot.
it might be a good thing to wait until it's all done and then like print out a list of like the reading order and just go through it that way
Mhm,
instead
mhm.
of like scrambling to keep up with it as it's
Yeah.
being
I
released.
try to stay on top of, like, who's who character-wise
Yeah.
just so, like, I can have a conversation about it, but yeah, no, it's a lot.
The other 2 comics that came out this week were Darth Vader #39 and Bounty Hunters #39. I enjoyed both of those, but yeah, my favorite was the High Republic comic, but those are all available now. And then some
Nice.
other comic book news for this week. We learned that Marvel Comics is issuing some Life Day variant covers in November. So the ongoing Star Wars titles will have like alternate covers celebrating
Oh,
Life
cool.
Day
Love
for
Life
the
Day.
month of November. Yeah, of course. And then in January, they're going to start putting out alternate variant covers for the 10th anniversary of Star Wars Rebels. So that's fun, and you can look forward to that. Now, outside of the High Republic, are you a comic reader? I probably asked you this last time you were on the show, but have you been
I'm not a
keeping up?
comic reader.
Okay,
I've read some of them here and there, but I'm not as good as I probably should be. Again, it's like, I gotta read an
it's
audiobook
yeah,
here or there, and it's pick and choose. Pick and choose with the time. Especially, I have a baby at home, she's almost 2. I'm 8
yeah.
months pregnant, so,
Oh, Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm having a baby next month, so guys, time is time is short.
That's very fair. Let's take some comments here. The one and only Tinkerbell, or
Aw.
Thinkerbell, I'm sorry, Thinkerbell said, I'm completely with you, Lacey. I don't have time for all the books either. Yeah, it's a lot of content to get through. And then also Thinkerbell said, oh, this is a good segue to our next news item here. They had a
Mhm.
12-hour lo-fi on YouTube where you could watch the Loth Cat, and they had the name in the description. That's I must have missed that. I
I
like
missed that too.
okay. I knew that it was happening, but I didn't tune in and I didn't catch the name. So I'm glad other people picked up on that.
I just
Um,
always, like, miss, like, "Oh, it's in the description. Oh, it's in this," and I'm like, "Oh god, I'm so guilty of not reading the description." That is so cool, though. I love those lo-fi things that they put out. They're really fun.
you know where I always used to learn the character names was from the action figures. Like I
Yes.
still am a
Yep.
big action figure person, but
Mhm.
that's like, oh, I know that character's name because it's a character who appeared in the background of the cantina for half a second, but
Yeah.
I had the action figure of it and it said their name big as day on the packaging. So
Look,
that's
I
why I
don't know
remember.
everything. I'll openly admit that. I'm
Yeah, me
totally
neither.
someone that Googles. As soon as
Yeah.
something comes up, I'm a Googler. So,
Wikipedia.
yeah.
Yeah. And then lastly, in Star Wars headlines for this week, a couple merchandise reveals. We got a press release from from Sideshow and Hot Toys, and they are releasing Cad Bane and Chopper figures. I think they're statues. They look very
Mhm.
nice. And then Rock Love, the jewelry company, are putting out a new collection for Ahsoka called the Silka Beads collection. Now, is Silka Beads a Star Wars thing, or is that like a real world thing? I
I
don't know.
think that might be a real world thing, but I know Rock Love has that really cool, it's kind of like a choker that comes around like this, and it's Ahsoka's, Leku that
Okay.
come around. And then I know they just released, I think yesterday, Hasbro announced they're doing figures now that are really cool. They
Oh
sit
yes.
on a light and they look like a hologram. It is like the cool I was like, "This is the most innovative
Yeah.
thing I've seen them do recently." Like, it was just very cool.
I saw that too at the Holocom collection from
They're very cool.
Hasbro. Yeah, they're all translucent blue figures. I think they're the size of these Black
Yeah.
Series
Yeah.
figures, and they come with the holo communicator, and they, like you said,
And
stick it on
words
there.
too.
And the wanted, yeah,
Mhm.
it's so neat. I will definitely be picking up one of those when I see that. But yeah, that's the end of Star Wars headlines for this week, and that brings us to our main topic. Very excited to talk about this with you. Star Wars Ahsoka season finale. So it says on Disney Plus. The title of this episode is The Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord, which as soon as it popped up, I'm sure most people recognize this as a reference to the Chronicles of Narnia.
Lion, Witch,
Um,
and the Wardrobe.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of references and allusions to like British literature in this season.
Mhm.
We had Toil and Trouble as the title of one episode, which is from Shakespeare.
Mhm.
And then Lord of the Rings, which, Filoni has talked about how Ahsoka the White is kind of drawn from Gandalf the White in Lord of the Rings, but
Gandalf the
also,
Grey too, yeah.
yeah. And then at the end of this episode, just to, spoilers, at the very end of this episode, when Balin Skull is standing on that big statue, the first thing I thought was Lord of
Those
the
2,
Rings.
like, the
Yeah.
statues of men, right? That they
Yes.
go on the boats through. I said the same thing.
Yeah.
That's immediately what I thought of because they even have their hand out like this.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of literary references and allusions, which I thought was interesting. And
Mhm.
then, I mean, just to tie that in, something I was going to mention later, but I'll just bring it up right now. The idea that we're getting all this literature, references to literature, but also so much of the content is coming from Star Wars literature. Like Grand Admiral Thrawn started obviously in the books, created
Mhm.
by Timothy Zahn 30
Mhm.
plus years
He was a
ago.
consultant on the show. Yeah.
Did he act as a consultant?
He
I didn't
did.
hear that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and then what I really loved about the last couple episodes is that we got confirmation in the episodes that Thrawn remembers having met and hung out with Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader, which
Mhm.
happened in the current canon novels that Timothy Zahn wrote about Grand Admiral Thrawn. Thrawn, I think it's called Alliances specifically, was the one where Thrawn and Vader and Anakin, there's like different timeline flashing back, flashing forward between those two
Right.
periods. But
It had that
yeah,
really cool cover at San Diego where they had
yes,
Hayden Christensen and Thrawn. Yeah, it was
yeah,
cool.
absolutely. But I just love, love, love that the Star Wars books and novels matter in that way, and that somebody will be watching these episodes and go, "What? Thrawn knows Vader and Anakin? Like, how does that happen? When
Yeah.
did that happen?" And somebody will tell them, they'll probably learn from Star Wars Explained or something, and go and read the book and get exposed to all this great Star Wars literature. So that's what makes me really happy. But let me ask you some stuff,
Mhm.
Lacey. You kind of mentioned this earlier. You kind of hinted at your history with Ahsoka Tano as a character. So I
Yeah.
want to ask you more about that.
Yeah, totally. So I have appreciated Clone Wars and Rebels. I've watched through them. I just have never been the biggest fan of them. And it's not because they're not great storytelling. It's not because of animation or anything. It's just, sometimes you connect with things more than others. However, that being said, I think because I wasn't the biggest fan of Ahsoka and or which the funny thing is I'm not the biggest fan of Ahsoka before this. I'm a huge Ashley Eckstein fan,
Yeah.
but I'm not the biggest Ahsoka fan. But, when she showed up in The Mandalorian season 2, episode 5, The Jedi,
Yes.
which was done by Dave Filoni, I again went in with such non-expectations because I'm not a big fan that I left the episode being like, "This character is amazing. I love everything about her." And I thought Rosario Dawson was great. And to see the reaction of some fans that had such high expectations be like, "This is not what I wanted. Oh my gosh, her look is completely wrong." And I was just like, "Oh, am I, like, behind? Like, do I not understand this character?" Because I loved it so much. And then when she showed up again in Book of Boba Fett, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see more of her."
Yeah.
This series was amazing. It was one of the best things that Star Wars, Disney, Lucasfilm have put out. I loved every episode, and on TRB, we give them a ratings of, like, 1 to 10 with, like, faces. So, like, we did Rosario Dawson faces this season, but, I gave every episode basically a 9 or higher,
Yeah.
like 9, 9, 9. I think maybe I gave an 8 one episode that I didn't really enjoy, but
Okay.
Mando sometimes I would give 7s, or
Mm.
Book of Boba Fett. I was never that high as a 9, and I gave this season actually a perfect 10, which was the episode with Anakin. I thought that was perfection, perfect storytelling, no notes. It was amazing. I loved seeing Hayden back. I thought it was a great way to show how Ahsoka has grown and what she's been through and her challenges. Oh my god, it was amazing. So, I am a huge Ahsoka fan now
So what do you
because of this show.
what do you think the difference is between your like previous association with Ahsoka and the way she's been presented in the live action stuff that has changed your mind about the character?
I think it's because I'm so into the live action shows like Mandalorian with Carson Teva showing up, and, I'm a huge Rosario fan, so to see Dave Filoni progress his storytelling in a way that he wanted it to me seems like such a wonderful moment, not just for him, but for us as fans. Because when you hear how his career has progressed, where he started in storytelling and he'd sketch things on napkins, and now she's a live action character, and you see him in, these behind the scenes clips where he's like, she's standing right there. Like, I drew that. It just has a different connection for me.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing I love more than seeing people succeed at their dreams, and seeing Dave, who always cared about animation and came from that background, but to see him progress to telling live action storytelling and now getting his own movie and like almost crying at Celebration, it's just to see that come to this point, I can't not be all for it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
seems like a dream that he's always wanted to see come true, and I love just living in this moment where he's doing his thing.
I feel like when the sequel trilogy was coming out, a lot of Star Wars fans were saying like, "Oh, you know, Lucasfilm is bringing in these kind of outside filmmakers to make these movies." When you have people inside
Dave's right
Lucasfilm,
there.
yeah, they're kind of like pushing pushing this idea that Dave Filoni is the kind of heir apparent for George
Right,
Lucas,
right.
which I think kind of many people are coming around on now in the wake of The Mandalorian and all this recent live action stuff. And maybe people just thought of him as the animation guy before that. And he has now proven himself, like you said, as a live action filmmaker as well. So I don't know. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what Ahsoka says at the end of this episode, actually, where she says like, "Oh, Ezra is where he needs to be, and we're also where we need to be." So maybe Dave Filoni was just he needed to wait for the right moment, and now he's where he needs to be
Well,
as
what
well.
better
So
way to make that transition than a character that you kind of
yeah,
came to light, brought to life, and then
right,
also care about so tremendously that I don't think any other character would have been the right progression for him to go into his own show, and then eventually I'm assuming that's what this movie is about. They haven't really said, but I'm
right,
assuming it's the culmination of the Mandoverse and Ahsoka and stuff. So,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's my connection with it is just seeing how far he and the character have come that like how could you not support it?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm super excited for everything coming up. But that brings us to last night, which is the
Mhm.
sorry, 2 nights ago actually now. Usually I do the day after, but like you mentioned before we started recording, I appeared on our mutual friends Star Wars Explained
Mhm.
on their YouTube channel. So pushed my
You
podcast
lose
back a
time, guys, when you're
bit.
doing all these
Yeah.
things and you're talking all the time. You're like, "What day is
Right.
it?" Mhm.
Exactly. So Tuesday evening, like you said, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, we got the eighth and final episode of Star Wars Ahsoka season one. What was your initial reaction to this finale?
I was unhappy there are so many questions, and that's
Yep.
not to say because the initial reaction is like, "Of course there's questions, Lacey, it's
Yeah.
storytelling." I get that. I just have a lot of anxiety, and I don't like open-ended situations. So when there's a lot of questions, I'm like, "Oh my god," and it's gonna stick with me, which it's
Yeah.
supposed to, so that's fine. But, other than that, I just wanted it to be longer. Like,
Yeah.
selfishly, I wanted more,
Yeah.
which is a great place to be. But overall, I thought it was a great episode. There was a lot of really cool action. It was very spooky and creepy with the zombies and all the witches and stuff, and
Yeah.
I hate horror movies and scary stuff, so it was like a new experience for me, but, I think our characters are all in a really good place that they can, basically take the story anywhere. So that's where I was. I was like, "Yeah, this is great." Was it my favorite of the season? No, my favorite was the Anakin episode, but
Right.
I think it was a solid end to this series.
It's funny if you go back and watch that Star Wars Explained stream from yesterday when Alex and Molly asked me what my initial reaction was to
Oh,
this
yeah?
episode. I also used the word anxiety um, because I just have this worry about the state of the entertainment industry right now
Oh,
and
yeah.
the way things are going, especially with streaming. We just have no idea what this format is going to look like as the years progress because I don't
Also,
think
when are we gonna get stuff? That was the other thing is I was
yeah,
like, "Oh my gosh, am I gonna have to wait 8 years to find out
right,
what the next rest of the story is?"
exactly. But yeah, my worry is that they're not going to be able to tell the complete story the way they want to. They're
Right,
already
right.
cutting back on the amount of streaming shows that they're making for Disney Plus. So I don't know if that's going to affect Star Wars. I hope it doesn't. I
Mm.
hope they get all that they want and they're able to fulfill their ideas of what this all should be, both Dave Filoni and John Favreau and everybody involved with these shows. But my biggest frustration really with this episode, which I liked on for the most part, but my frustration came from the Balin Skull storyline, which we were just so keyed up, or I was so keyed up to learn more about what he was going to do, and we got a
And
little
and
tease.
Ray, unfortunately, is no longer
Yeah,
with us, so
I
it is
know.
what it is.
Yeah, so that's the other part of it is you never know like what's going to happen in the real world to affect this uh storytelling stuff, and it is a huge tragedy that we lost Ray Stevenson as an actor because he's so wonderful as we
I
saw in
know.
this show. But
Yeah. In
now it
everything, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And now it means because of what we learned in this episode, it means we won't be able to see him follow through and see that story follow through in the way that they were intending.
Mhm.
But what I don't know, what do you think about that? Do you think they're gonna recast that character? Do you think Filoni's gonna rewrite or reconfigure the way he wants to have this story unfold? What are your thoughts as to how this might be approached?
It's so tricky. I know people were passing around a clip yesterday of Ray Stevenson at Celebration talking about how this character was like kind of a catalyst for the story and is pushing along this quest, and there's bigger things at work than just him. And I would assume if you were to ask Ray right now what he would want, of course, he wanted the character to continue on. He wants the
Yeah.
story to be told. Any actor or storyteller wants that. So I'm going to assume they're going to recast it to someone else. Hopefully
Yeah.
they get someone that looks similar, but at the end of the day, makeup can do wonders. Um, I don't think you can just let that storyline go. I
Yeah.
think it was such a big moment to have him standing on that statue and be like, "Oh my god, Mortis, like it's happening."
Yeah.
Um, to just be like, "No, we're not gonna really touch on that anymore." And Dave loves this. Dave
Yes.
loves this stuff. George, which most people don't realize, also loves this stuff. He's the one that pitched this whole thing to Dave. So I wouldn't cut off the line, the thread of what this story is just because the actor's no longer with us. I think they would continue it on.
I think so too, and the Damons kind of said the same thing. So I think that's probably the direction they'll end up
Right.
going in. And I in addition to Dave Filoni likely wanting to see this through, I really wanted him to see it through because it's so, it's exploring this side of Star Wars that we haven't really seen a ton of. Like I think I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'm not a huge Clone Wars guy. I think I've seen that arc, the Mortis arc, once exactly. So I want to go back and revisit
It
that,
is
especially.
confusing. I'm gonna
Yeah,
admit it is confusing. You gotta get through it a couple times and or
right.
read about it to really understand what's going on. And a lot of people weren't big fans of those episodes. So for them to make that jump to live action and say, no, we're doing this. I mean, Dave did everything he wanted to do with this series. He added
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, and a lot of it was stuff that he had introduced into Star Wars to begin with, like you said, like Ahsoka, the Mortis
Right.
stuff. So he's following through on that, and then he's
Mhm.
also drawing from the literature, like I said. So this episode, sorry, the Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord. I had the wrong title here from last week. This was directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who we know from The Mandalorian, of course, and he does a terrific job. We know he's really capable as an action director, so I think he did really great with that. All the episodes of Ahsoka were written by Dave Filoni. The director of photography was Kuyen Tran, who did the movie Palm Springs. The editors were James D. Wilcox, who did the movie 13 Lives, and Dana E. Glauberman, who did Ghostbusters Afterlife.
She's all about the spooky stuff with the editing,
Yeah,
huh?
that's true. That's true. Let's see. I want to ask you about this character right here, Morgan Elsbeth.
Oh.
She was introduced in that episode of The Mandalorian you mentioned earlier. She's a relatively new character, and she had a pretty interesting storyline this season, which came to an untimely end. But I think she went out swinging, literally. What did you think of her little arc in this episode? It started off with her kind of getting this promotion from the Great Mothers. What do you think of this character, Morgan Elsbeth, and where she ended up?
I thought she was great starting in Mando season 2. Like that whole fight scene, I thought Diana, who's the actress,
Yeah,
was great. Um, I had a feeling she was gonna bite it
yeah,
just
me too.
because she's one of those characters that throughout the whole season kept questioning Thrawn and like questioning what was going on. And I was like, you never want to question Thrawn. Like, you never want to question the bad guy. Like, let him do his thing. So like I wanted to be there being like, stop, just stop, don't say anything. And also the moment that, she got her powers from the Night Sisters, and they were like, she was like, what did she say? She said something along the lines of like, for Dathomir or something. I was like,
Yes.
ah, she's dead. She's gonna die. Because it's like letting you know. But I thought her whole transformation was super, super creepy. And
Yeah,
like the whole magic of the Night Sisters in general to me is just like, just gives me bad vibes. I'm not digging it. Like, I just want to know like where this ends up because it can't be a good thing. Like, you don't have characters that look that creepy and be like, oh, they're the good guys. Like, they're okay.
right,
They're gonna be
right.
all right. Like, there's a reason they look and sound and do the things that they do, like bringing people from the dead.
Yeah,
But I thought her fight scenes were incredible. I thought her and Rosario Dawson and the stunt people were really, really great. It's sad to see her go because I love the actress so much and she's been so giving on social media and with fans and everything that I wish her like, nonstop success.
yeah,
But I think she played her part. She got them to Thrawn and we knew like, hey, someone's gonna probably die at the end of this and it's probably gonna be her because there's always got to be one sacrifice to get
yeah.
the story going.
Agreed. Yeah, and I loved that transformation scene as well. That was probably my favorite part of the episode, and I didn't even remember that something similar to this had happened in the Clone Wars too, with Asajj Ventress when she went to Dathomir. That
Right.
I learned from Star Wars Explained too. I got to go back and rewatch the Clone Wars, I guess. But
They break it down second by second over there. They're
yeah, exactly. But she's given this blade of Talzin, who is Mother Talzin, the
Yep. Maul's
um
mom.
yeah, exactly, which is very cool. Now, that upset me because I got the action figure, and the action figure came with nothing. There's no accessories, no weapons, and then I'm like, "Well, I need that sword now to go with her,"
And the face stuff
and the
on,
markings on the
yeah.
face, exactly. But,
Which is so like Hasbro to put stuff out that then disappears, like the Razor
yeah,
Crest. Yeah. They're like, "Here's this
exactly.
new thing," and then the next episode, that person's dead. It's
Right,
like
I
they
don't to be fair to Hasbro, I don't think they know. I don't think they
No,
tell
they
them
don't. They're I
who's
feel so
dying
bad
or
for
what
them.
ship is getting blown
They
up.
did that whole HasLab, and then they were like, "Hooray!" And everyone was like, "Alright," and then they were like, "Blow up." Yeah.
In the comments here, we've got from Thinkerbell, the resolution or lack thereof of Balin's storyline is the only thing I did not like about the finale. It was so unsatisfactory. We did not even know what he wants. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of hinted that he wants to close this loop or end the
Become
pattern of
ultimately
the
powerful, yeah.
rise and fall of the Jedi. Geo wants to know how Ezra managed to get off the Chimera with a shuttle. So yeah, he's got that night trooper disguise on at the end there, and he takes the little ship off the Star Destroyer and goes back to the New Republic fleet. I
They
don't
did
know how
leave that
he
out.
I don't know how he escaped. Yeah, they don't tell us, but my question is why he doesn't take the helmet off when he lands on home one and they're all like pointing their blasters at him and he walks out. Helmet should have come off immediately to me.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think they were trying to play a little bit of a parallel with Luke
Yes.
Skywalker, where he shows up
Right.
to save Leia, and she's just like, "Aren't you a little short to beat?" And he's just like, "Oh, sorry," and then he takes it off. I thought that that's what they were trying to
Okay.
parallel, but I do understand that it is weird because you think like, "Hey, do you wanna die?" Like, maybe you just don't leave that on.
Exactly. Another question I have for you about Ezra, and I
Mhm.
asked this of the Daemons as well. Why does he suddenly need a lightsaber? Last week he made a big deal about how he doesn't need a lightsaber anymore. He fought with the Force. It was pretty sweet. We haven't really seen a Jedi fight without the saber before, and be able to like deflect swords and blaster bolts
Mhm,
and everything
mhm.
without the need of a saber. Suddenly he gets on the Jedi shuttle where Hu Yang has his little cabinets and workshop, and he's building a new lightsaber. What do you think the change is? Why does he suddenly need a lightsaber again?
That's a great question. I think that Ezra has a lot of trauma that he hasn't dealt with. I think that, there's been a lot of back and forth with fans and critics and whatnot about Ezra because they're like, he's just like the cartoon, or the animation. He's so funny. He's himself. And
Yeah.
other people are like, how is he exactly like this? He's so cheesy. He's funny. I think that's his defense mechanism of like, hey, I was stranded on this planet by myself for 10 years. And when Ahsoka brings this up in the episode and she's like, Ezra, what should we expect? And he's like, I don't know. I didn't come over here. Like Thrawn was doing his thing and I stayed away. I hung out
Yeah.
with the turtle, like snail people. Like I hung out with them. I didn't go by here. And then when Sabine hands him the lightsaber, and this is obviously in the previous episode, he seems very much like, nope, that's you. You do your thing. I'm not going to touch it. It just seemed like there was maybe more of a connection with that lightsaber that he was like, I don't want to go there yet. Whereas this episode, he knew he needed one to get where they needed to go home. Like he
Okay.
couldn't not fight with one. But I agree with you, which I'm assuming is that you're gonna say is that it was very glossed over and he was very quick to be like, yeah, I guess I need one.
Yeah.
You
Uh,
know.
the
Plus
other
they get that moment with Kanan, right? He has one, Kanan has one. It felt very much Harry Potter to me, like two
right.
people with the two wands that are similarly made.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
but yeah, no, I agree that that was definitely something that was glossed over.
The other really strange thing I thought about that scene was the idea that Hu Yang doesn't know anything about Ezra, and Ezra doesn't know anything about Hu Yang. Like they're both telling each other their stories, but I was thinking, like, wouldn't Ahsoka have told Hu Yang all about Ezra because they're looking for him? You know, like isn't Hu Yang
Yeah.
asking like who are we looking for and what was his deal and who was his master? Like he doesn't know that Kanan was his master even. Um,
I totally agree, and I would be the person that's like, "Hey, here's where we're going and what we're doing." But I feel like,
yeah,
especially what we've seen from Ahsoka in this series is at least the first half, she was very standoffish. She was very like, "Just do this, Hu Yang. Like, don't."
yeah,
And then you see her warm up after she died and then came back to life again. How many times are you gonna die, Ahsoka? Um, After she came back from the world between worlds, like not only did she look different, she started acting different. She was more friendly with Hu Yang and she was more giving and more understanding and more jokey, the Ahsoka we
yeah,
expected. And I feel like that was showing you that like she was so guarded and also dealing with trauma. Trauma is a big word here in Star Wars.
yes,
Dealing with her stuff that she was very standoffish with everyone from Sabine to Hu Yang to whoever just to try to get through. But once she had that moment with Anakin and realized like I need to give more, like that whole sequence where she's talking to Hu Yang about like, hey, tell me the story again. Like
yeah,
Ahsoka from episode 1 wouldn't have said that,
right.
but the other Ahsoka did. So I feel like she probably kept stuff from him, not out of like, hey, I'm keeping this from him, just because she probably didn't think it was important.
That's fair. I think that makes sense to me. In that same scene, speaking of trauma, actually, in that same scene, we find out why Ahsoka kind of abandoned Sabine's training
Right.
earlier on, and the reasoning was because she was afraid Sabine was just looking for revenge because of what happened to Mandalore. What did you think of that whole explanation?
So I jokingly said on our podcast that on TRB that I have a fight. I'm having a fight with Sabine. I'm very angry with Sabine because in
Yeah,
this series she's very selfish, like very like all about me, and I don't like that. But I understand that she's needed for the story, and I compare her kind of like Star Lord with Avengers, where he did stupid things for Gamora that ended up causing bigger problems. So
yeah,
I understand where she's coming from, but and I think we see her progress throughout this season, but at the end of the day, she does still make selfish decisions, and I think that rings true when Ahsoka says, "Look, I was afraid she was gonna go to the dark side." And
right.
we get these moments throughout the season where you're like, "Sabine's a little on the darker side." Like, she's very kinda she's already snarky and sarcastic, but she leans more dark. And I know a lot of people were questioning at the end of the episode if what she felt wasn't Anakin, but was the same thing that's pulling Balin's skull is pulling her. That
Mm.
darkness. I mean, it's a question. We always have characters that have the trouble with the light and the dark, and Sabine might be one of those characters.
And we also get that very dismissive speech from Thrawn at the end where he's like, I know you because I knew your master," which I mentioned before that he's referencing having known Anakin and Vader.
Oh, so
But
condescending.
then he also kind of suggests that she might go down the same path that Anakin went down.
That speech was so well done, and it was one of those moments as a villain where you're like, "Oh, he's bad.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a bad guy. He's, like, 4 steps ahead of everybody, like, he's evil, and he's also rubbing it in their face."
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was definitely he's scary. He's
Yeah, Thra
scary in a way that, like, I didn't know I'd be scared. It's kinda like Moff Gideon, actually, in season 1 of
yeah,
Mando, where he shows up and he's like, "I know all your names, and I know everybody who's here." But it's different because you see how calculating he is, especially in
yeah.
the past 3 episodes where he's, like, at the war table and he's like, go here, do this." Again, just like Ahsoka, I wasn't the biggest Thrawn fan. I love this
Okay.
series being a Thrawn fan. I was like, "He is evil, and I like it." Uh, and I feel like we talk about it a lot in TRB how Star Wars sometimes has villain problems where you have this great villain and then they kill him.
Yeah.
Or the villain doesn't get to that level of like Darth Vader or Palpatine or whoever, or they bring Palpatine back for the 17th time that you want a bad villain. And Thrawn is that guy right now. Like you look at him and you're like, oh, he's bad. He's a bad guy. And he's just mocking Ahsoka. And I think Star Wars needs that.
Yeah,
And I like that
absolutely.
he's not force sensitive or anything. He's just, like,
Right.
really calculated.
And I think the difference to me between Gideon and Thrawn is Gideon believed he was the smartest guy in the room, and Thrawn actually is the smartest guy in the room. I don't know
Yes.
if that's accurate to you,
That
but
is
that's what
100%. That is a great way to put that. Yes. Yes.
let's see
And
in the
Gideon got very much into, like, "I need a helmet."
Yeah.
Like, okay.
In the comments here, we got Johnny Fernandez saying Sabina and Ahsoka are not Jedi, but have force powers. I don't know. Are they going to call themselves Jedi? That's a good question because, uh, eh,
StarWars.com called Sabine a Jedi on their website this week.
and so
Sabine
did.
is listed as a Jedi.
Okay, and I mean, there was the title of that Mandalorian episode, which was the Jedi.
Mhm, mhm,
Other people
mhm,
have called her a Jedi as well, including
mhm.
Thrawn, I think. So, does she consider herself a Jedi now? When she had that vision of Anakin in episode, what was that, 4 or 5? Your favorite episode. He said
Yes.
he was going to complete her training. Does that mean that she has now graduated into being a full-fledged Jedi? I don't know. What do you think?
That's a great question. I think that Ahsoka was someone that walked away and we see it in Mandalorian when she's talking to Din Djarin about how she's like, "I'm not a Jedi, I didn't accept that." But as we go on and through Sabine's own eyes and experiences, um, Ahsoka says about Sabine, she goes, "I don't need Sabine to be a Jedi, I need her to be herself."
Yeah.
And I think Ahsoka learns throughout this season that being a Jedi doesn't mean like, "Hey, I graduated and got a certificate and got
Right.
her approval." A Jedi can just be a way of living and or choice that you're on this side of the fight. So I think Ahsoka and Sabine are both Jedi. I think Ezra's obviously a Jedi, but
Yeah.
I think Ahsoka is. Also, all the toys and marketing and everything has been calling Ahsoka a Jedi, so I'm sorry for the people that are arguing that
Fair,
she's not.
fair enough.
I
We
think that
also yeah,
she is.
I'm with you on that. We also got to see finally we saw Sabine actually use the Force for telekinesis in this episode, which
Yes.
surprised me. I thought they were gonna go a different way with it. I kind of hoped they would go a different way with it, but I've heard arguments on the other side. People wanted to see this. People wanted, you
I've
know
heard both. I've heard
yeah,
people say, "No, I do not
me
want it at all,"
too.
and then I've heard people be like, "I'd be cool with it."
I'm on the fence about it myself. I'm having
Mhm.
trouble wrapping my brain around this idea that you can teach yourself or be taught to use the force if you don't have that innate ability
That
inside of
is
you.
a tricky thing that I
Yeah.
kinda dealt with, what was it, episode 3 or 2 or
Mhm.
3 of this season, where Ahsoka's telling Sabine, like I think it was 3 or 4 actually. I'm losing my track of mind here. But, where Sabine and Ahsoka are sitting down at the table and they're talking about the Force, and Ahsoka saying like, "Oh, well, everybody has it, but it's the skill that lets you, harness it." And to me, there was a little bit of like a "wah wah" moment for me because growing up with the original trilogy,
Yes.
it was some people had it and some people
Right.
didn't, and you were either like gifted with the Force or you weren't. And that's okay because once you open that door that everybody has it, it kind of to me just feels less special. And I
Mhm.
look, it's not my story to tell. I'm not saying like, "Hey, they're wrong." I'm just saying growing up, like, Han didn't have the Force. He was just
Yes.
really good at flying and really
Right.
talented. And then, as we know, Leia had inklings of the Force because she's related to Luke, but, like, in the first movie, she didn't really have any Force power. She was just a really good
Yeah.
senator, and so I feel like once you open that door that everybody has it, it just seems less important, I guess.
Mm. Yeah,
That's where I've been grappling with it, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel.
I'm definitely, or I was definitely where you are with that. I've been trying to kind of come around to the other
Sure,
side because
sure.
clearly this is the way things are going, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I actually asked my wife last night about Harry Potter because she's a big Harry Potter fan. I had never have
Which
been,
some
and
people have wizard powers and some
yeah,
people don't,
yeah, it's like either you're born with the magic or you don't have the magic. You can't really learn it
or
if
you're
you
a
are
muggle.
a muggle, right? And Star Wars was always the same way. Like you said, growing up, it was like either you were born with access to the Force and you could go and learn with the Jedi to develop it and master it, or
Right.
you're born a muggle basically in the Star Wars universe with no Force powers. But now I guess if you want to tap into it, you can learn how. It's going to take some getting used to. That's
I
for
think
sure.
so too, and like I said, again, it's not my story, so they could tell it any way they want. It just, to me, makes it less special, so I just have to see how they handle it moving forward. Because it's like, okay, now are you saying Mando has force powers? Now are you saying Bo-Katan has
Yeah,
force powers? Like, what does this mean? Or are you saying, "Oh, no, only Sabine does." Well, why does Sabine have it and nobody else has it? So, a lot of
exactly.
questions.
Yeah, a lot of questions about that that I'm sure will be addressed in the coming years.
Mhm.
Let's see. The last big thing that I want to talk about with you about this episode is kind of the elephant in the room here: zombie stormtroopers. Um, I think there was this book called Death Troopers a while ago, not related to the Death Troopers from Rogue One. That was about zombie stormtroopers that
Yeah.
arose from a different origin, but now we've got them in live action for the first time from the Night Sisters magic. I thought it was a lot of fun. What was your response to the whole introduction of zombie troopers in this episode?
So, I have kind of a view where I think they're all dead. I
Okay.
really do, because when you first see them, they're all covered in dirt. They have all this like red string and gold and everything, which you understand the Night Sisters helped them kind of get back together. They fixed the ship because they're wearing red and all their stuff has gold, so it's like their kind of aesthetic that they've weaved throughout this ship. But to me, it seemed like they were all dead and that they were brought the ones we saw this episode volunteered after already being brought back once to then be revived nonstop through the
Yeah.
magic. But I still feel like they're dead already. And I
Okay.
know people are like, "No, they're alive," and then they brought them back, and I'm sitting there like, I felt like they were all dead. They brought them back to make this army. That's why they're covered in dirt and they look all messed up. Because you have to think they've been gone for 10 years. How did all these people eat? How did all these people live?
Right.
Um,
But did
and
they
they
have the green glow in their eyes before they were killed? That's the only thing that's
they
confusing me about.
didn't, but the way I saw it is, and again, I could be totally wrong. The way
Yeah.
I saw it is the green was the reviving of
Okay.
coming back and back and back again. And
But
made them
that
more
would fade
aggressive.
after a while,
Yeah.
you think? Yeah.
Because the death troopers, the ones in all black that we do see, literally have zombie bodies under them. So if they had been alive and
Yeah.
just died, they
Right.
wouldn't look like that.
Right.
They would be just, "Hey, I just died and I lost my arm." They wouldn't be, "Hey, I'm literally rotting under here."
Yeah.
So that's what I feel. I might be wrong, but regardless, it's so creepy because it reminded me very much of like 28 Days Later or Walking Dead, where for the longest time, zombies weren't that scary. Like, it was creepy that
Yeah.
they'd, like, were obviously dead, but, like, they moved slow so you could get away. These guys are aggressive, like, you're not getting away from these guys, and they seemingly have terrible aim like normal stormtroopers, but they don't stop. They just keep shooting at you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're very aggressive.
It's funny, I had to get used to the idea of, like, running zombies. This is probably 20 years ago when this became a thing.
Yes, and they're
Like
very, very scary.
28 Days Later, one of those
Mhm.
movies.
Mhm.
Much like I have to get used to the idea that you can be trained to use the Force. So
Yes.
I guess I'll get used to it eventually. All right. Anything else from this episode that stuck out to you? Any moments you really loved, or maybe something you didn't like? What do you think?
So, 2 things. 1, I'm very surprised, Hera didn't hug Ezra. Like,
Yeah,
why?
right.
I'm asking that question.
Maybe the actors were never in the same place. That's a
I mean, that
possibility.
could totally be a possibility. I
Yeah,
didn't even consider that. That's totally right. Um, but I thought the actor playing Ezra was perfect, and I
yeah,
think he lived up to everybody's expectations and or hopes of who it would be. And then the end, I loved how this episode ended with Anakin, where he's kind of overseeing Ahsoka, and you see the convor fly away, like the
right.
little owl character. Um, I just love seeing Hayden. Anytime I get to see Hayden, it's a
Yeah.
joy.
I'm very proud of myself with that because I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago on this show, I predicted that the last shot of this episode would be Anakin's Force Ghost smiling at Ahsoka. So
Yeah,
kinda
yeah.
kinda nailed that one, but, I guess it's a little predictable. So, cool. Let's talk about where this goes from here. So, a pretty successful overall, I think, season of Ahsoka. I think we both really liked it. Do you think there's a second season coming up? Do you think this will be continued elsewhere, like in that movie that's been announced, the Dave Filoni movie? Obviously, there's other shows coming up in the Mandoverse, like the Skeleton Crew show, probably more Mandalorian. What do you think? Where do you think we'll see more Thrawn? Where do you think we'll see more Ahsoka?
I think this is all going into a season 2. I think the reason they haven't announced it yet is because the strike's still ongoing and they wanna celebrate that with the actors when the strike's no longer happening.
Right.
So I think we're gonna get a season 2, definitely. I think for the movie, it's gonna be a culmination. Kathleen Kennedy had said this back in 2020 of all these series together. So I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be Mando, Ahsoka, Skeleton Crew,
Boba Fett.
Boba Fett all
Yeah.
together fighting Thrawn. I think that's gonna be the big movie. So I'm excited to see it. Fingers crossed. I hope that's what it is. But yeah, I think we're gonna see Ahsoka pop up in other things. And I'm surprised Mando didn't pop up in this at any point because we did
Right.
have Carson Teva.
Yeah.
Carson Teva brought up Mandalore, like, oh, what happened on Mandalore? I was like, there it is. The
Yep.
Leo
Now we
DiCaprio,
know
like
where it
there
is
it
in
is.
the timeline.
Yeah.
And he's Carson
Um,
Tava's kind of like the common thread between all these shows, like in the way that the
he's like
droids
the
were in all the
John
movies.
Ratzenberger
Yeah.
of the Pixar the
Yes.
Pixar universe
There you go.
is Paul Sung-Young Lee.
Right.
He's so great. And every time I see him on screen, I'm so happy for him because he's such a big Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
So to know that he gets to be a part of this universe and like have his little moments. And I loved like where he held back Chopper. He's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So there was that moment though that they started shooting down fighter pilots, and I was like, if he dies right now, I'm literally getting on a plane to go to Lucasfilm and be like, what are you doing? Because and hopefully Hasbro makes his action figure soon. Just gonna throw that out there, but
Oh, that's gotta happen soon.
gotta
Yeah.
happen, right? Gotta happen. But yeah, I think it's all culminating to a big movie, and John from TRB seems to think that's when Ahsoka's gonna die.
Oof.
I don't think she needs to die. I don't think every character's story needs to end with them, like, dying in a
Right.
traumatic way or like, big gigantic thing, but we did have Taylor Gray, who's the voice of Ezra, on our show a while ago,
Yeah.
and we were talking because this is before they announced who was who. We were talking about, where he thinks Ezra is and, like, what does that mean? Because a lot of these characters, the big question after all these stories that they're telling is, why weren't they in the sequel trilogy? Where's
Yeah.
Ahsoka? Where's all these people? And he had mentioned that, he had asked Dave why he wasn't in the end credits or the end Jedi scene where all the Jedi are talking, like Kanan and Ashley did Ahsoka's voice of talking to Rey. And Taylor Gray had said, like, oh, Dave, why am I not in that? Ezra
Yeah.
should be there. And Dave had said, well, Ezra's not dead. All the people there are dead. So if that's the case, then Ahsoka's dead. So she's
Oh,
dead by the sequel trilogy. So where does that lead the story? Now, of
right.
course, that was a private conversation. So Dave could change his mind and be like, well, she's just speaking to the Force. But I mean, I'm taking Taylor's word for it that that's what Dave said.
Yeah.
So I have to go off of that and say, okay, well, what happened to her in the course of this time
Mm.
period? So that's why I think also John thinks that she might die in the movie and or a big culmination moment. She might sacrifice herself. So we'll see. But I think, yeah, it's definitely leaning towards the movie.
Okay. Is there anything that did not happen in this season that you would have liked to seen happen, or that you would like to see happen, like in a season 2? My big thing is Zeb.
I was going
They
to say
brought,
Zeb.
yeah, Zeb was in the Mandalorian. I thought for sure they're introducing him here, so we'll have him in Ahsoka. They'll have the big Rebels reunion.
I think he cost too
Um,
much money. I
okay,
think he was so good
yeah,
CG that they were like, we're going to blow our whole budget if we use Zeb. So they're holding him for the next budget.
yeah. I think that makes sense to me. Was there anything else, or that was your pretty much your answer
I
to that?
really wanted Mando to show up because I wanted to have that
Okay,
like thread, but I don't understand
yeah,
how he would, but I like that it was Carson that pulled
right.
it all together.
And referencing the events of the most recent season of Mandalorian, that was pretty cool
Right,
for
right.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that let's go to the comments here. Bruno, hi guys, good to see Lace here too. And then
Hi, Bruno.
Thinkerbell had one more. I'm a bit behind because of the internet connection. The zombie troopers were really cool, especially the 2 death troopers in the silver armor. Yeah, like you pointed out, super neat to see that. Okay, that is going to wrap up our discussion of Star Wars Ahsoka for this season. We got through it, everybody. I really enjoyed the show. Looking forward to more. Let's go to our final segment here on Who's the Boss. It's called First Steps into a Larger World, where we talk about the media that we've been consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. My example this week is Wes Anderson, the filmmaker, the director, released 4 new short films on Netflix that are all based on the stories of Roald Dahl, the
Wow,
children's
really?
author. Yeah, and I really liked all these. I liked a couple more than the others, but they're all really fun and entertaining. Got a great cast. It's definitely very
Nice.
much in the Wes Anderson style. If you
Love
like his
that.
style, you will like these. So go and check those out. How about you, Lacey? What have you been watching or reading or playing anything recently?
Yeah. I've been into Only Murders in the Building season 3,
Okay.
which just got renewed for season 4.
Yeah.
The finale just posted the other day. I haven't watched it yet because, Ahsoka trumps anything. So I gotta watch that this coming weekend, but
Okay.
I love that show. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's hilarious. It's a whodunit mystery. It's Steve Martin, Martin Short, Selena Gomez at the peak of their acting careers. They're just so good. And then also I've been watching Guiltily Love is Blind on Netflix.
Okay.
I love those like really bad Nick Lachey universe dating shows. It's one of
Okay.
those things that you can just throw on and just like do other things, but like you're like every couple minutes you're like, what did they just say? Um so yeah, I find those really fun. And for some reason I've been going back and watching some Hell's Kitchen too. I've been on a Gordon Ramsay kick. I find him hilarious. But overall, Only Murders in the Building is
uh,
that and Ahsoka.
So I have not seen Love is Blind, but I have seen the first season of Murders in the Building. Really like that. Need to catch up on 2 and 3.
It's
Uh,
good.
the other funny thing about that is I was listening to, have you ever listened to Mark Maron's podcast, WTF?
No.
It's kind of an interview show, but he had
Oh,
Chevy
cool.
Chase on recently.
Oh.
Chevy Chase is among the same generation of actors as
SNL. Yeah.
Steve Martin and Martin Short from
Mhm.
Only Murders. They were all in Three Amigos together, the
Right.
movie back in the 80s. And Mark Maron asked Chevy Chase if he wished he was part of the Only Murders in the Building crowd, and Chevy Chase wished he was, but he admitted that he hadn't even
Interesting.
asked them if he could be on the show. So I
Also,
hope
he has a bad rap, like,
he
people really don't
does.
like him,
Yes. That is
you
very
know?
true. From his time on Community and other stuff, he has a bad
Mhm.
reputation. I don't know if they've had a falling out, those 3 guys,
Yeah.
but it would be cool if they heard about his desire to come on and
And
maybe
had him do a
season 4,
cameo or
he
something,
can be
yeah.
the murder victim or something. I don't know. Or
They could
or
kill him,
just
they could finally get their revenge. They're like, "Well, we'll have you on, but we're gonna kill you."
exactly, exactly. So crossing my fingers that happens. Okay. That's gonna wrap up this episode of Who's the Boss. Big thank you to my wonderful guest, always wonderful, Lacey Gilleran. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your time this week to come and chat with me
Of
about
course,
Star
this was a
Wars.
blast. Thank you so much for having me. It means a lot when you, asked me to come on. I love talking Star Wars.
Oh, thanks a lot. You're very, very welcome. Where can people go to find you if they don't know already, which I'm sure they do, but please remind
Oh.
them.
People can find me on social media at Lacey Gilleran or at It's Lacey Gilleran on TikTok. Long story there. Don't want to get into it. I lost my name. They wouldn't give it back to me. So it's Lacey Gilleran.
Okay.
That being said, people can find me also on the Resistance broadcast, the Star Wars podcast, which we broadcast or put out episodes twice a week. We talk about everything from the news to what's coming, discussions, top 10s, stuff like that. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next episode on Who's the Boss, we're going to be talking all about Thrawn with my
Ooh.
buddy Christian Brennan, who's a huge Thrawn fan. I've been waiting to, because this is the first live action depiction of Thrawn. So I've been waiting to hear his thoughts on that. So that'll be the next episode. Tune in for that next week. My name is Mike Celestino. I want to thank everybody out there for listening or tuning in here live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. As always, visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. And I'm on Instagram at Who's the Bossk Pod. You can see what I'm up to over there. That's it for this week. Thanks again for listening. Bye.